Welcome to the Community Living Educations Project's Sharing Possibilities for Community Connections learning event. My name is Melanie McGackin, and I will be your host for today's webinar. The Community Living Education Project, also known as CLEP, is a program through Rutgers School of Public Health. CLEP is committed to providing individual guidance, mentoring, and education regarding community living resources for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities living in the state of New Jersey. The CLEP team, many who are family members themselves, can serve as a bridge for families whose loved ones may be seeking residential supports outside of the family's home. Please visit our website for more information or to register for future events. To ensure the highest sound quality possible, all attendees will be muted during today's event. To interact with the host or presenter, please use your Q&A option on the screen. Topic-specific questions will be addressed as long as time allows. For consideration to all of our attendees, and we encourage you to keep your questions as general as possible. Today's webinar, titled I Need Help, When to Access Behavior Support Services, is being presented by Ms. Delia Sequeira in collaboration with the New Jersey Division of Developmental Disabilities. Without further ado, I would like to welcome today's presenter. Welcome, Delia.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this very short but but never fear, this will be made available via recording at a later date, and that information will be provided to everyone. Okay, so my name is Delia Sequeira. I am a behavior analyst with the state of New Jersey, and I have been a consultant for the developmental centers for about 6 years prior to starting as a state employee. And now my work officially is composed of training. So this is what I do all the time, although I've been in the field for a long time of behavior analysis and working with adults with disability. So let's discuss briefly the webinar objectives. So today, what we're going to be discussing, just in very general nature, some of the things that we can do when challenging behaviors interfere with daily living, how to address sudden changes in behavior, ruling out reasons for changes in behavior, and the importance of seeking assistance to prevent crisis. So really, we're just going to do a broad, brief overview of some of the things to look for when these issues come up. All right. Oh, sorry about that. So a little bit about myself. Like I said, I am a board certified behavior analyst. I have been working in the field since about 2001. I did my undergraduate work in applied behavior analysis as well as my graduate work. And currently I am completing my doctoral degree in applied behavior analysis. So I've been in the field for a while. I've been certified since 2007. So that comes with a lot of experience and a lot of learning that's taken place in my career. And most of my career, I've been working with adults with disabilities, like I said. And I've been here in the state of New Jersey for the last 12 years. All right, so let's start discussing the topic. Many of you may not be familiar with the science of applied behavior analysis. Some of you guys may be. It's becoming much more commonly discussed and heard of. So what is applied behavior analysis? Essentially, applied behavior analysis is the application of the science of human behavior. So we're really looking at trying to understand, trying to assess, and trying to change behavior to better the person and the quality of life. So the aim is to improve socially significant or socially important behaviors through interventions that are based on the principles of learning theory. The way that I personally like to define ABA, it's just the detailed science of learning. So we really break down how people learn individually and really modify their environment, promote teaching that really benefits the person. And this can be applied in many different settings. This is not just something that is done for children with autism or adults with disabilities. It absolutely can be applied in every setting that a human engages in. Some other settings where applied behavior analysis is used is in the medicine field, in fitness and athletics, the workplace environment, and even something very specific such as traumatic brain injury. So the interventions that are used through behavior analysis have been evaluated repeatedly through many experiments, and they really are looked at as evidence-based practices and often preferred practices for interventions for challenging behaviors or increasing skills that benefit the person. So what can ABA accomplish regarding appropriate behaviors, regarding skills to be learned, regarding socially important behaviors? We're really looking at increasing, strengthening, and maintaining. So you're looking at skills such as life skills, communication skills, social skills. And we really want to try to maintain behaviors that are learned. For example, self-control and self-monitoring procedures to maintain and generalize job-related social skills. There's many possibilities for teaching, learning, and maintenance. And ideally, for anybody that's involved in the process of teaching through this manner, it's to generalize and transfer those skills to different areas in order to benefit them. So for example, teaching a young man at a group home how to complete chores, which can then be generalized to maybe a job position where they perform well, because now they're learning the skill sets necessary to be able to also do those tasks. So we really are looking at the word teaching. So you're going to hear that from me throughout the presentation repeatedly. I really want to make that point come across. Okay. So regarding inappropriate behavior, which is a little bit of what we're looking to discuss today, right? What can ABA accomplish regarding challenging behaviors, inappropriate behaviors, or behaviors that are detrimental to the person? We're really looking again at that teaching process, right? We're looking at environment, we're looking at what sets off the opportunity for a challenging behavior to occur. We're looking at how we can rearrange the environment to promote teaching and learning of appropriate replacement skills, or behaviors. So we're really looking to reduce those interfering, challenging, and appropriate behaviors via teaching, and via teaching of replacement appropriate behaviors that accomplish similar to same outcomes as the inappropriate did. So for example, someone that engages in self-injury, aggression, or property destruction through ABA with a good ABA therapist, a board-certified behavior analyst, you're looking to assess those behaviors, really discover the root cause of those behaviors, and then modify the environment and teach appropriate replacement skills. So if someone engages in aggression to access attention from, say, a caregiver, well, we really want to look at the ultimate goal, right? That person wants to access attention. So now the question becomes, well, what can we teach to allow this person to still access attention, but now through a socially appropriate behavior? So do we now look at functional communication teaching, meaning we're looking at teaching better communication skills, improved skills, maybe teaching them how to request attention from others appropriately. If they can speak verbally, request verbally, right? If they can communicate using sign language or signs or augmented communication devices, we look at that, right? Or gestures. So we really look at the person's abilities and capacities while assessing the environment, while looking at ways to teach. So that's really the goal of what ABA does. So that's really what our focus is, looking at that process of learning and teaching. Okay. So a little bit about my work personally. One of the things I do for the state of New Jersey is that I do provide workshops that are free of charge to provider agencies. This is different from the workshop series that you have registered for at the moment. This is a DDD Rutgers collaboration. My work really focuses on having workshops, providing workshops for others that are longer in length. We do more, a little bit more of a deep dive into some of the introductory topics of applied behavior analysis and topics that can benefit behavior support staff, direct support staff, to really understand better what the process looks like of teaching behavior. So these workshops are geared, I have a set that's geared towards direct support staff, and I have also another set that's geared towards staff in a managerial position or above. So if you're interested in learning more about these workshops, at the end of the presentation, I will give you my email address, and you can feel free to email me anytime. I'm very glad to respond to answers and email back with you. And usually those workshops range in time length between 2 hours and 3.5 hours. So they are a little bit more in depth than something like this, which is a very basic introductory session on the information. Okay, so let's start talking a little bit about the administrative details of how to access behavior supports. First and foremost, when you're looking at the adult population, you really want to focus on identifying information from DDD, meaning the Division of Developmental Disabilities. The Division of Developmental Disabilities is the one that assists with funding services and supports for eligible adults. And the services are offered in the community through over 200 provider agencies that exist, either in group homes or day programs, assisted support for work. And under very special circumstances, the state does look over 5 residential developmental centers, and they are administered by the division. But those require very special circumstances to be admitted to one of those residential facilities. We really are focusing on providing support to the community so that there is more inclusivity for the population that we support. So the services obviously through DDD also include behavioral supports, and there are provider agencies that do focus on behavior supports, on providing behavior supports. So what is the eligibility for DDD services? To receive funded services that are funded through the New Jersey Department of Human Services and the Division of Developmental Disabilities, an individual must apply and be determined to meet the functional criteria for having a developmental disability. And the division circulars are available to the public through the DDD website. These are information documents that provide a lot of different topic essentially regulations for the state. And so you can really learn more about what is offered, what are some of the guides and regulations for different topics relating to the developmental disabilities and the services that are provided. So you can absolutely find those via the DDD website. You also have to be Medicaid eligible and maintain Medicaid eligibility. And you have to establish that New Jersey is the applicant's primary residence at the time of application. Some more details. In general, to meet the functional criteria of having a developmental disability, an individual must document that they have a chronic physical and/or intellectual disability that has manifested in developmental years before the age of 22, is lifelong in nature, and substantially limits the individuals in at least 3 of the following areas of life activity: self-care, learning, mobility, communication, self-direction, economic self-sufficiency, and the ability to live independently. Now notice this does not say that every single one of these would be affected. It says at least 3 of the areas. So it actually broadens the range of possibilities for services for many individuals. Okay, an individual must be 18 or older to be evaluated by DDD for functional eligibility for developmentally disabled services, and an individual must be 21 and older in order to access the services. So we do have a small caveat for some of the individuals being served. If an individual who is 18 or older and was previously determined eligible for services through the Children's System of Care, they can complete a short application, so they don't have to go through a really extended process. They're going through a slightly smaller, shorter process. All right. So let's look at behavior supports and why they are important. So whether the person you support is currently receiving services or not, it is always important to be involved and aware of when to seek more assistance regarding behaviors of interest. Behaviors of interest can be both skills to develop as well as challenging behaviors that are affecting the person's quality of life. And those behaviors of interest can manifest in many different ways. You can see changes in behavior due to medical conditions. This is a point that we will be discussing in a few minutes. Changes in behavior, both sudden and gradual. It is important to be really aware of how the person is functioning in their environment in order to pinpoint changes that could be crucial to identify quickly in order to intervene and provide support early on before something becomes a crisis. Also, changes in behavior due to different life transitions. So we're going to be discussing all these items briefly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about skill deficits. Why is it important to be aware of skill deficits? One of my biggest, I don't want to say pet peeves, but pretty close to it, is when I hear somebody say that person just can't learn, right? No matter the person's abilities and capacities, they are capable of learning. So what we're going to be looking at is what kind of abilities and capacities someone has in order to determine the skills that they can learn to improve their quality of life. Not everybody's abilities and capacities are the same, so learning and goals will look very different for every person. But what we want to do is really identify those skill sets to improve somebody's quality of life and really focus on an individualized learning plan for the person. So we really want to address that skill deficits are important to look at. They can be barriers to achieving the highest level of independence that that person is capable or able of achieving. So another thing we want to look at is, does a behavior, right? If we're looking at skill deficits, does a behavior prevent or limit the person from engaging in self-care, learning, mobility, communication, self-direction, economic self-sufficiency, and the ability to live independently? So all those markers we want to look at. What impacts the person's life the most? And if the answer is yes to this question, then it may indicate that there are skill deficits that maybe can and should be addressed in some way, shape, or form. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the highest level of independence. The highest level of independence is going to look very different for every person that we support. The reason we focus so much on individualized support is because every person is going to come with a different set of abilities and capacities. What do I mean by capacities? Meaning, what is the person capable of? Where can we push a little bit more for that person to learn? Like I said before, one of my biggest, let's just be honest, pet peeves is that I hear often people saying, oh, that person's just not going to change. They're just not going to learn. But that's not the case. Under the right circumstances, under the right conditions, and under the right teaching strategies, somebody can absolutely learn. Someone that functions at very low cognitive levels and someone that functions at very higher cognitive levels of functioning can learn. So we're looking at that difference and that individualized support for the person. So achieving the highest level of independence will depend, like I said, on the person's abilities and capacities. For some, it can mean learning to make a simple request via teaching improved communication. For others, it may mean being able to be employed and while having a job coach, so some assistance. And for some, it may mean living independently within an apartment setting that's supported. So there's some assistance available to them as needed. Personally, my job experiences have allowed me to do all of these things. I have been a job coach in the past. A brief example of that is a young man that I worked with when I lived in Florida. I am a Floridian, that's where I come from. His name was Bill, and Bill did not speak verbally. He communicated through sounds, gestures. His documentation indicated that he functioned cognitively at the level of maybe a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. And obviously we know that those are numbers that are determined by different assessments, but when you actually work with the person, those numbers kind of get thrown a little bit out the window, right? You start to see them for who they are, all their intricacies, all the things that they're able to do and not do. And Bill did engage in some challenging behaviors, one of them being pulling other people's hair. So at the very early onset of his arrival to our day program, it was very difficult to take him to public places, to even have him in the day program, because his thing was to pull people's hair. So you could see how that challenging behavior limits his ability to function within his community, right? And because we were a team of young up and coming behavior analysts with supervisors that were behavior analysts as well, we looked at the behavior, we assessed it systematically, technically, and we identified that the reason the behavior was happening was to access attention. And so in this case, we taught Bill how to access attention in a more appropriate fashion using a tap to the shoulder. And through different interventions, we were able to decrease the pulling hair. We were able to see a very maintained increase in the using of tapping shoulder to access our attention. And that all of a sudden opened up the world to Bill. Now we were able to take him without worry out in the community. Not that it didn't really stop us before, because we were always in a big group, and all the people that we supported had a very good ratio of staffing. So they were safe with us. But it really just made it so much easier to see that decrease. It really did increase his level of independence. And actually, one of the things we were able to achieve is get him a job. A person that initially you wouldn't have thought could get a job, Bill was able to get a job at Ace Hardware, watering the plants. Now, it wasn't an easy task, I will tell you, because I was there. But Bill was able to hold the hose with assistance. I was in charge of teaching him how to do that. We also did a lot of very close proximity standing to each other, because Bill also liked to water not only the flowers, but the people that were walking through the garden area. If he heard voices, he would say, "Bill," and just kind of turn and water them a little bit. So we had to do some small adjustments into how he performed his task of watering the plants. But Bill was able to do that 3 times a week, earn a paycheck, and it was another activity that he could do, something else that he could enjoy throughout his day. So you really want to look at that teaching aspect to really address these bigger issues in somebody's life. So that's an example of someone being able to be employed. For some, it may, like I said earlier, it may also mean living independently in an apartment, if that's a possibility. Okay, so something else to look at: sudden changes in behavior. Sudden changes in behavior can be very jarring and confusing for anyone who's trying to support a person. It is of utmost importance to really take steps to identify why the person's behavior has changed suddenly. And the first foremost thing that should be done is to rule out medical concerns. Medical concerns that can absolutely have an effect on behavior, and they can absolutely have sudden changes in behavior. Here's an example of one. I do have a friend that is a neurologist at one of our local hospitals here in New Jersey, and she mentioned to me that one day they had a patient come in that was being extremely aggressive, extremely not responsive. It was very difficult to manage him and try to find out the reason why he was experiencing this amount of discomfort and displaying these behaviors. Well, when they were finally able to calm him down and get him tested for different things, one of the things that they did do was an EEG, and they discovered that he was actually having seizures. And that was not previously diagnosed. He was not under any medication for seizures, but the seizures were causing some of these behaviors. So ruling out medical concerns is primary, and most behavior analysts will also function under this rule. Essentially, it's not a written rule, but it's a learned rule for all of us, and that we want to look at and rule out medical concerns first and foremost. If medical concerns are ruled out, you are looking at potentially a learned behavior that has become effective for that person in accessing whatever outcome they're looking for. So that's when you really want to kind of backtrack into that behavior world and the learned part of behavior. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about gradual changes and some of the things that can occur to the supporting people around the person when gradual changes occur, and that's habituation. Habituation means getting used to, right? So gradual changes can be very difficult for people to notice because, again, the changes are occurring in very small and incremental steps. And what may seem like a big sudden change all, one day may in fact have been something that changed gradually over time that we just got used to. So caregivers can habituate to these small incremental changes. They can get used to them without noticing them. And so this means that the caregiver may not notice these changes. And it really kind of forces us to look at ourselves, look at how we're observing things in the environment, observing the person, and we really want to be attentive to those changes in order to provide appropriate supports as needed, so that the person doesn't fall into crisis when things have just kind of been let go for such a long time. So we really are looking at these concepts in order to prevent crises, promote teaching, right? That's exactly what we want to try to focus on. Okay. So teaching, like I said, I mentioned earlier, you're going to hear that word from me pretty much the entirety of the presentation. Teaching is the key to success. Not all of us come with the tool sets or the skills to teach, but there are many of us out there that is exactly what we focus on. And this is why accessing behavior supports is so important. It's so critical. So teaching people skills is critical to improve quality of life, increase noticeable signs of happiness in someone, help them achieve the highest level of independence possible, help them achieve the fullest potential depending on their abilities and capacities, and in the end, also to keep the person safer. What do I mean by keeping the person safer? So some of the individuals that we support may absolutely need total care. I don't want this to be kind of an idealized chat on how we can teach everyone to do everything. That may not be the case for everyone. That's why I've been focusing on the words abilities and capacities and individualized supports. But when someone needs total care or quite a bit of care, the concept of learning and teaching also remains extremely important, because that's also going to apply to the staff that are supporting or the caregivers that are supporting that person, because we're not going to necessarily be focused on teaching the client or the person that we're supporting. We're going to be focused at all times on also teaching the staff the critical skills that they need to provide the best supports that they can. So it's kind of a 360 degree event that occurs. Not only are we trying to teach the person, but when we're trying to teach someone a new skill or to modify the environment to decrease a challenging behavior, we're also teaching those who are supporting to follow through consistently, through to be observant, to implement strategies, and to really provide the outcomes that we need to provide in order to maintain long-lasting learning. So that is very important, that whole 360 feedback on the teaching process. And we want to be really attentive to that. The appropriate professionals must be in place in order to create these teaching plans for persons and their individualized needs. So we really are looking at folks who are specialized in behavior supports, especially applied behavior analysis, and board certified behavior analysts. One of the things that you'll see coming up is requirements such as the behavior manual support for DDD. We're really now addressing that concept of who is out there supervising these behavioral supports. And we really are looking at board certified behavior analysts to take the lead on that. So again, one of the reasons why it's so important to know who we are, what ABA is. Okay, so what are teaching and learning? We are throwing these words around so often. I really want to take a moment to address what exactly these two things are. So teaching essentially is the rearrangement of different variables in the environment to facilitate learning. Teaching is not simply presenting or demonstrating information. In order to see the outcome of teaching, you really have to see the learner's behavior change. If the behavior is not changing, then something about the teaching process is not working. So we really want to, it's everything that surrounds us, but it's also everything that is within us. So everything outside the skin, everything inside the skin is the environment. We are constantly interacting with our environment, and that is some of the process that is included in that process of learning. And so learning involves changes in thinking and other internal behavior, as well as overt behavior. And really what you're looking for is that behavior change. If behavior change does not occur, then teaching was not successful. So we have to maybe rearrange different variables, find different ways of teaching. All right, so what are the implications of teaching? The implications, there's many, right? In order to begin teaching a new skill or strengthening a skill that is weak, you must know the current level of the person's performance. So the other word that I've been sort of sneaking in throughout the chat is assessments, right? Assessments are critical. They are necessary to know the current level of performance. And behavior analysts have a whole slew of tools to assess, and our teaching as professionals, as behavior analysts, is to really learn how to assess, observe behavior, collect data on behavior. Data is critical. That's one of the upcoming workshops that you're going to see in this series. Why so much data? Because data allows us to look at behavior objectively, right? It allows us to see what's going on. It allows us to measure, compare, and contrast, set goals, address how the behavior is changing over time, whether it's improving or not improving, in order to make critical decisions for the treatment plan. So data is very, very important. And when we teach individuals, they must also be given enough practice to become fluent in those basic skills needed to learn more complex behavior. So, and for competent performance to last. So one of the things I always say is, whenever we teach someone a new skill or decrease challenging behavior in order to replace it with an improved skill, that becomes a jumping board for more, right? That allows us to look at what else can the person learn? What else can we try to improve this person's quality of life? And so that teaching process just propels someone forward for betterment, really. That's what we're looking for. So I never underestimate the abilities and capacity of the men and ladies that I've worked with before, because there's always something surprising that can happen. And oftentimes it comes from what we've already been doing, that teaching, that learning process, and improving their quality of life. All right. So let's look at a couple of examples, some cases that I've worked with, and really address that teaching process in the middle of these little cases, right? So the first one is the case of Mary. Mary was a 25-year-old young lady. She engaged in some pretty severe self-injury. She used to bang her head on hard surfaces. And I say here that she was not getting enough attention. That was the suspected reason, the suspected function of the behavior. A doctor did prescribe a helmet for safety and protection. But when we got involved with her case, the team of BCBAs that I worked with, there were 4 of us. We assessed that behavior carefully and systematically. We collected data, we did interviews, we monitored, we observed this young lady in different environments at different times, different lengths of time, just to see how that behavior occurred. And it was really, the conclusion was that the reason the behavior was happening is because she was bored, because no one was really talking to her. And that time frame was very specific. It was about 35 to 45 minutes if she was kind of left alone with some items, some things that staff thought would be entertaining to her, but they really weren't because we were seeing that behavior. So the solution that we came up with was to use an augmented communication device. She could not speak vocally, and she had difficulty with gestures. So what we ended up using was a Mac button or a communication button where you're able to record a message, and the message was super simple. It was, "Come see me, please," right? And so we recorded that on the button, and we taught her to tap the button before she engaged in target behavior. So if she was participating well with an activity and the 20-minute mark was coming up, we thought, okay, this is the time to teach her to press that button to kind of get that interaction, a change in her environment, new activity, new interaction. And so we started teaching her how to use that. But here's the critical piece. We need the outcome to occur. So what we needed to do was also train staff and teach them to be extremely responsive to that button. That button was our key to preventing that target behavior from happening and to really teach her a different way of communicating with staff. So staff learned fairly quickly that if they responded to that button, Mary would not bang her head. And that was a pretty severe, intensive event. And so it actually was very reinforcing for staff to also respond to her button because they were now avoiding essentially that big event, right? Messy, blood, doctors, potential trip to the hospital. It was just a very intense moment. But when they responded to her button, they came, they spoke to her, they're very specific. They were following very specific instructions on how to interact with her, what to do when she pressed the button. And eventually the helmet was faded because the target behavior was no longer occurring. I'm not saying it took weeks, it took a little bit longer than that, but we also have to look at the rate of learning for some of the individuals we support. Depending on cognitive level of functioning, the learning time frame is going to differ. For some, learning can occur really quickly. For some, learning can take a longer amount of time, but we really are working on that repeated exposure, the practice that I was talking about earlier. So that's the case of Mary. We saw success there. Here's the case of Buddy. This is a gentleman I worked with in Florida, and Buddy was a 42-year-old man. He spoke fairly clearly. He did not have a job, but he was very capable. And one of the things we noticed, again, this is part of that being attentive to the environment, looking at skill deficits, looking at where we can increase quality of life, looking at how we can teach. We noticed that he loved U-Haul trucks. If we were out in a community outing and he saw a U-Haul truck, the first thing he did was point at the truck and call it out by its name. He'd say U-Haul truck, and then he'd make the sounds of a truck backing up. It was really sweet and endearing to see, but there was something to that. We knew he liked it. We knew he was intrigued at minimum, right? And one of the things that we always think about is how to think outside the box, be creative in what we can do. And the director of our program went ahead and spoke to the local location manager for the U-Haul truck area. And she asked if Buddy could have a job. And one of the things he said was, you know, we do need someone to sweep the dock where the trucks come in and out, and agreed to let him try. So what did we do at the center? We assessed his performance. Can Buddy sweep? So we gave him a broom and just said, hey, Buddy, can you sweep this? And we realized he needed a little assistance. He did not know how to use the big industrial broom, the kind that you kind of push forward, not like a house broom. And so we got one of those and we started teaching him how to sweep. And we were using the back area of our center where there was a lot of asphalt. We had a basketball court back there. And we were teaching him how to sweep these big areas. And we took him to U-Haul. He tried it. The manager agreed to hire him. And there was another success story. Buddy now had a job, and man, did he love it. He got a U-Haul cap. He got a U-Haul t-shirt, and he was so proud of showing off his U-Haul merch essentially that he was getting for his job, and he was thrilled. He went almost every day. We reminded him throughout the day program that if he had a really great day, to remember that he was going to work afterwards. And so it added to his life. It added to his quality of life because he loved going there. All right, so that's the case of Buddy. And now we have one more. We have the case of David. David was a 67-year-old man living in a residential facility with mostly young men in the home, right? And one of the things that occurred at this home with David is that loud music was often played on the radio. He did not like that. He was not a fan of the loud kind of hip hop music. His favorite kind of music was Beatles, Elvis, and the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys, that's it. And one of the things he would end up doing is screaming loudly and in distress for about 10 to 15-minute intervals, often loud enough to be heard in the next home over. And so one of the things we recognize is that it was critical for him to learn how to request to move to a quiet area. Since he was a little bit older, he did have some physical disabilities as well. He did not walk very quickly. He had mobility issues. So he needed assistance from staff. So what we taught him is to request to sit in the quiet foyer. The minute he would be taken to the foyer with staff assistance, he would just immediately calm down. And so we taught him how to request, and we taught staff how to honor that request immediately. That prevented the screaming, the distress, and others becoming upset because David could scream pretty loudly. And so that was yet another success story with really looking at that behavior, assessing it. It was escape maintained, right? He wanted to get out of that area. He wanted to make that aversive sound stop. And so the screaming, because typically the screaming was initially maintained by just getting him out of the area, what we did is we provided that intervening behavior, that appropriate skill, which was foyer, right? Or requesting quiet, please. Eventually he learned how to request to visit me. I was his behavior analyst, and he never learned my name. He just learned to call me friend upstairs. I thought that was very interesting, because friends upstairs is such a much longer phrase than just my name, Delia. But if he said friends upstairs, they would call me at my desk, and if I was there, he would come over and hang out with me, and we would listen to Elvis and the Beatles and the Beach Boys. So that was a very cool opportunity to just have a quality time with the person that I provided supports for. So those are 3 little cases that I wanted to demonstrate to you guys how critical it is to look at teaching and what we can do for people to improve their quality of life. And these are all individuals that function at very different cognitive levels. So you can see success at different stages, with different abilities and capacities. All it takes is some good support for the person to address those skills that need to be taught, or those challenging behaviors that need to be decreased. All right, so transitions are also another time where we want to look at, we want to be aware of, to see sudden behavior changes. And what are these transitions? Transitions from anything really, but here we're focusing on living arrangements. So from home, right, from living in their parents' or caregiver's home to living within a community provider residence, from one provider residence to another, because those transitions can occur as well. Say from a state facility to a community provider, transitions from the children's system of care to services from the Division of Developmental Disabilities, that child to adult transition. These are all transitions that can have an effect on people's behavior. And those variables that make the transition difficult, I mean, there's new staff, different staff, a new home, even a different area of the state, different peers. And if somebody is employed, it can mean changing jobs. And something as simple as different restaurants, new shops, something that they're not used to. So we want to look at transitions as well and address that change that will occur. So preparing, teaching can also occur proactively. And that's really where we want to focus. We don't want to look at something reactively, because then the person's already experiencing the challenging behavior, the distress that comes with that. We want to look at proactive in order to prevent so much. And that's why it requires so much observation, attentiveness on our end as support providers, so that we can look at and address those situations accordingly. Okay, so how do we access these supports? I've given you here on this website, on this webinar PowerPoint, some of the links to DDD's website. You can browse. There's a lot of information in the DDD website for resources for caregivers, family members. You have also the DDD provider database that you can look through, but really focusing on the work that support coordinators do. Support coordinators are your link to kind of corralling all the services you'll need and accessing those services. So the support coordinator job is extremely crucial to really be aware of what they do, how they do it, and always remember that you must speak up. If you don't speak up, if you don't request, if you don't ask, things may not happen. So you want to make sure that you're vocal about the needs that need to be met for the person you're providing supports for. Who funds these services? Well, the most common source of funding is Medicaid. There are others. I'm not as familiar with them, so I'll be very honest about that. Right now, my job mostly at DDD is to go out and train principles of behavior analysis, but I did provide you a link to the DDD website where you can look at funding and how funding happens. And obviously, you can call the division, ask for assistance. There is a help desk, and or reach out to your support coordinator for that. And my final reminder is that do not hesitate to ask for help when it's needed. Like I said, speak up, raise your voice, because the services are available. They may not be incredibly easy to access, but there are services available to help you. And you really want to focus on the quality of life of the person with disabilities, and really anyone involved supporting them. That quality of life is at stake for everyone if we're not attentive to changes that can cause crisis or distress in them. So think of teaching, think of learning, think of all the things that you want to try to achieve in order to make everybody's quality of life just a little bit better. All right, with that, I am done, but there's a couple more slides that I want to show you briefly. This is the first of a 5 series of webinars. So I'm including here all the different series with the bullets of their specific topics we'll be touching, and it'll be me discussing them. So if you appreciated, liked our little session today, please come back, come and see the other 4 webinars. There's a lot of interesting information I'm going to be providing. Yes, it's brief, short, little exposure to the topics, but still very informative nonetheless. And so we have part 2, which is promising practices, the basics of ABA, where we'll be talking about defining behavior analysis a little bit in a more detailed manner, describing the whys and hows of behavior, and improving quality of life by teaching new skills. Again, you'll see these words often from me. This is what I do. Part 3, can we just all get along? Arranging your environment to create positive interactions. We really want to look at how to make everybody's life just a little bit better, and interactions matter. And so we want to address the points of how to avoid harmful interactions, how to promote positive interactions and successful teaching opportunities, the benefits of staying close, right? So staying close allows you to be more observant, more aware, more attentive, and finding the purpose in helping others. Part 4 is the importance of behavior assessment and behavior support plans for those of you that may require this support for a person. We're going to briefly touch base on all the different items, such as the importance of ruling out medical conditions, which I spoke about briefly today, how to pinpoint behaviors to change, what is a behavior assessment, and are they just more than a questionnaire? And yes, typically they are more than just a questionnaire, more than a questionnaire. Teaching you skills, again, and how important that is, just as important as decreasing challenging behaviors. And the last part will be so much data. Why does it matter? We're really going to deep dive a little bit into why we're so intent on collecting data. But data matters. It's how we prioritize behaviors to change. We're going to talk about the difference between subjectivity and objectivity in behavior supports. We're going to talk about how data provides accountability and provides us the ability to evaluate behavior support programs. And we're going to talk just a little bit about how to analyze data and read graphs, something that not many people are accustomed to, but it really is flooding our world from different directions as well. And that is it for me today. Everybody, thank you so much for coming and listening to me. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at delia.sequeira@dhs.nj.gov. I will gladly answer questions to the best of my ability or try to direct you to the right source for seeking answers regarding any questions you guys may send me. And I believe that's it. My references, I am providing them as well. And these are all easily accessible references if you have any desire to look a little bit more into the places where I got my information from for this presentation. So thank you everyone again, and I'm gonna send this back to Melanie so we can wrap up for the day today.
Delia, thank you so much as always. Really looking forward to the other parts in this webinar series. I hope everyone that's joining us today will also register for those sessions. We will make sure to send out an email specific to that registration also as a reminder. So you do have a few questions that have come in, and I'm actually really thankful that the questions are general enough. I think that could be asked online today. So can you talk a little bit about, we have someone wondering if they should be teaching the person and the caregiver at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm assuming this is specific to teaching independence or new skills.
So I would say it depends on the goal, but most of the time, yes. I would say that if the caregiver is at home and is the primary person involved with the client that we're supporting, then yes, you want to teach both people, both sides, right? Let's throw it, for example, teaching someone how to brush their teeth, right? Or strengthening that skill. You're going to want to teach the skill set to the person that will be brushing the teeth, but you also want to teach the caregiver how to teach that skill, how to monitor it, how to maintain it. So there is teaching involved on both sides. For those of you that are familiar with services in the children's side of the world, one of the things that there's a huge focus on is parent training. So parent training goes right alongside with working and teaching with the child. So we're going to look at that same model here, where the caregiver should also be trained or taught how to assist with the teaching process.
And do you offer any training or support to individuals that reside with their families or to support coordination agencies? I believe that they're referencing your full trainings that you offer.
Yeah, so the full trainings are available to the support coordinators. I actually just sent out a big mailing to all the email addresses I received for support coordinators. And so they have access to attending these workshops. Parents are more than welcome to come. I don't necessarily provide specific trainings in the home or for individual cases. So if you're interested in attending the workshops, please feel free to email me, or if you know that your support coordinator might be interested, if you pass my email along, I can send them the workshop brochure and inform them of how, when, where they can attend my workshops.
Wonderful. And I'm assuming this goes for self-directed employees who work within the family's homes as DSPs also?
Yes, that's available to them. And then at that point, because I don't have email addresses to reach out to them, if they reach out to me, then that's absolutely a possibility.
Delia, can you just put your contact back up on the screen?
I sure can.
Perfect. I want to make sure.
There you go.
resource. Great. And is it possible to teach new behaviors to someone with Down syndrome who's beginning to show signs of dementia? I think also, right, we've had some questions come in about behaviors, using the word behaviors only in a negative sense.
Yes.
So can you just briefly cover that again also,
Oh,
how it's not
sure.
necessarily a negative term?
Absolutely. So the way that I teach about the word behaviors, the word behavior encompasses every single thing that we do, not just challenging behaviors. That is a misnomer and kind of a misrepresentation of the word. I'm very clear about speaking about the differences. So if I'm talking about challenging behaviors, I use that terminology. If I'm talking about appropriate behaviors, I'm using that terminology because behavior is everything a person does. So it's a much more general word than what most people use it for. Regarding an individual with Down syndrome that's starting to show dementia, it's not necessarily my topic of expertise, so I'm going to answer as generally as possible. I do believe that there's strategies that can be implemented to assist that person in maintaining their skill sets to the best of our ability and capacity and their ability and capacity. But with dementia, what you are seeing is a decrease in functionality, obviously, of the person, brain activity, essentially. So you will see a decrease, but there are some things that can be done. And if you look for supports for the geriatric population or behavior supports for people with dementia, you may be able to find a little bit more information through that. I apologize that I don't have a lot of answers to give you regarding that topic, but from what I've heard is that there are some things that can be done. And we're really looking at that from the work that's being done for essentially adults that have dementia, right, that are diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. There is some work being done in that realm. So it could potentially be applied in the same manner to someone who has a developmental disability.
Wonderful. And again, hopefully that person support coordinator can help point them in the right direction.
Exactly.
For the appropriate resources.
Yep.
And if you do not have a support coordinator, feel free to reach out to the email that you received this reminder from or my email also is in the chat. So feel free to reach out. We'll try to find some good resources that may be able to assist.
Yeah.
Delia, can you talk a little bit about and this I think is going to be addressed probably in a future webinar, but if someone not necessarily in crisis, but is showing some increases in challenging behaviors, can you talk a little bit about next steps that family may want to take or an agency want to take?
So
Who
absolutely.
they reach out to?
Yeah, looking to access those behavioral supports quickly is very helpful. So the thing you want to get to is the root of why those challenging behaviors are starting to occur or increase or strengthen, because there is something that is providing an outcome for them that maintains them. So we want to find out the root reason, identify it so that you can start to address that root cause by teaching a replacement. So you want to look for supports pretty much for someone like me, a behavior analyst or a behavior specialist that will look at that, the reason. We'll look for that reason through systematic and effective assessment of the target behavior. If you can pay attention to what's going on in the environment, we always talk about what happens before the challenging behavior, what happens during the challenging behavior, and what happens after. And you can start to observe maybe some things that are occurring to provide more information to those that might come in to help support you. They'll give you guidance. If I am a behavior analyst coming into your home, I'm going to be providing you so many tools and so much information to look at those different pieces of the puzzle, essentially. So the other thing to really think about is that when you're looking at receiving behavior supports, be flexible, be open, be willing to discuss a lot of information. It may feel very overwhelming at first. What I always tell parents or caregivers who I work with is that at first it's going to require a lot of effort, a lot of effort, patience, tolerance, flexibility. But as the behaviors improve, both the appropriate, right? If the appropriate is increasing and the inappropriate behavior is decreasing, over time it gets a little bit easier. And so that's one of the things that I kind of want to add to this little response. But really looking for help matters, because if you don't know or don't understand the root cause, that could just potentially make things a little bit worse over time, or maybe a lot worse over time. And so we want to try to be proactive in getting assistance to change those behaviors.
Wonderful. So I would like to actually get to one more question if you still
Sure.
have time.
Absolutely.
So we have someone asking, is there a guide somewhere for writing policies and procedures for behavioral supports? This is a newer agency and they do not yet have a BA on staff. Any suggestions?
So there are contacts within DDD that can help you with that. If you email me and link your question directly to the email, like, if you know, who can we contact for assistance with writing that, I can direct you to the person that, as far as I'm aware of, is still working in that realm. The pandemic has thrown a lot of things for a loop right now, and us working at home has been interesting, but I can reach out and see if that person is still in charge and connect you to them to get assistance.
Wonderful, thank you. So I see that we do have a few other questions. We are actually out of time at this point. So I am going to reference, again, your email address is on the screen. So if someone has topic specific questions, can they reach out to you, Delia?
Absolutely, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. And just as a reminder, this is part 1 of a 5-part series. So we encourage everyone to please register for the other parts of this learning event. We, again, will send out additional emails with those details. After today's session signs off, you will have a very brief, maybe 30-second post survey that will show up. Again, it's information that you provide us that allows us to better serve you in the future, specifically around the topics of events like this. So please be well, everyone. We look forward to seeing you at our future webinars, and we will talk to you then.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.